Hello everyone, this is Harry's movie. In this issue, let's watch a revenge movie, Road to Perdition. Sullivan was a man who loved his family very much, and at the same time was a professional killer. He was loyal to Rooney, the local gangster, and Rooney regarded Sullivan as his child and treated him very seriously. Sullivan's two sons also regarded Rooney as his grandfather, and they got along very well. The father's preference made Rooney's son Connor dissatisfied with Sullivan, although both were Rooney's right-hand men. But Rooney was not optimistic about his ineffective son. On this day, a member of the gang who managed the business was executed for allegedly using power for personal gain. Rooney felt sorry and organized a grand funeral for him. The brother of the deceased cried at the funeral, claiming that both of them had been dedicated to their duties for half their lives and never deceived their superiors. Sullivan sensed that these words were innuendo, and went to the stage with Connor and took him away. Rooney was a little worried, but Connor said relievedly, he just drank too much. He would talk to him alone later. Rooney, despite his son's refusal, insisted on letting Sullivan follow. Rooney apparently knew that there was something tricky and didn't directly pierce it. Sullivan's eldest son Mike was in his adolescence and admired his father very much. He often saw his father take the gun home and was very curious about his profession. So Mike secretly hid in the car while Sullivan was performing the task, trying to see what his father was doing. Sullivan picked up Connor and got out of the car in a warehouse. Mike didn't dare to go in, so he hid behind the door, and through the gap, he saw Connor talking with the brother of the deceased inside. Connor said that his brother was more than guilty. The younger brother retorted that his elder brother was innocent, and someone must have planted the blame. He also knew that Connor had private accounts in Chicago. Before he could finish talking, Connor couldn't wait and shoot. Upon seeing this, Sullivan fired quickly and solved the opponent's men. Just as Sullivan was angry, Connor found Mike outside the door. When Sullivan chased it out, he saw it. It was his son who saw all this. Sullivan's first sentence was to ask his son if he was injured. Then he told his son that he must not disclose what happened today. Connor was afraid that the child's mouth was not tight. In response, Sullivan only said, "He is my son." Although Connor seemed relieved on the surface, he actually had a bad idea in his heart. On the second day, Rooney visited. The youngest son didn't know what was going on, but he still loved this grandpa. But the eldest son was a little afraid of what happened last night, so he gradually alienated Rooney. Rooney took out a coined promise to Mike and said, "A gentleman must pay his debts and do what he says." It implied that he should be a man of promise and that he could not break his promise if he kept his secrets well. Mike understood this truth, but he slowly became unhappy. He couldn't suppress emotions and even fought with classmates at school. Rooney enlightened Sullivan and advised him not to blame Mike. After all, the son was born to cause trouble for the father. But Connor's contemptuous attitude made Rooney very angry. Obviously, he had lost a good brother, but it seemed to be irrelevant to Connor. For this reason, Rooney slapped the table and stared at Connor to plead guilty to other senior officials. Connor felt humiliated and blamed Sullivan for all the blame. So Connor wrote a letter to Sullivan, threatening to be a collection letter from his father. This was originally a very common task, but the debtor was shivering nervously after seeing the letter. Sullivan sensed that something was wrong and quickly snatched the pistol and killed the people on the spot before the opponent took the gun. Sullivan took the letter and saw it was written impressively. "Kill Sullivan and all debts are paid." Obviously, this was Connor trying to kill him and Mike. Sure enough, Connor broke into Sullivan's house in a mask and killed his wife and young son. At this time, Mike just walked outside the house and hid in the dark after hearing the gunfire, waiting for the murderer to leave. Sullivan went home and saw the heartbreaking heartache of this situation. On the other hand, after Rooney knew about it, he kept cursing and beating his son. But Connor was his biological son, after all, so he couldn't leave him. Sullivan did not stay at home too much and brought his eldest son to Rooney's door. He was ready to kill Connor to avenge his wife. But when he opened the door, he found his old colleague sitting inside. Rooney prepared some money for Sullivan and asked him to take his son far away. But Sullivan was now full of hatred and couldn't accept such a solution. He shot and killed the colleague in front of him and drove to Chicago overnight. He used to work for a big man Nitti there. He wanted to persuade the other party to help him with his ability. But there were exchanges between the gangs. Although Nitti respected his talents, he didn't want to break the balance because of Sullivan. After Sullivan left, Nitti pushed the door to the back room. It turned out that Rooney came to Chicago a long time ago to collude with Nitti. Rooney didn't want his son and Sullivan to be harmed, but the big guy persuaded him to let go of his old feelings and treat Sullivan as a stranger. Rooney had no choice but to ask for Mike's life. Nitti understood and hired a killer who liked to take pictures to perform tasks. Here, Sullivan was going to take away the money that Nitti has in major banks to force him to give up protecting Connor. In this way, Sullivan taught his son to drive with him and walk into the bank. Every time he grabbed a bank, he left his name behind. The purpose was to allow the bank manager to pass the information accurately to the ears of Nitti. Sullivan learned from one of the managers that Connor's accountant had just withdrawn a large sum of money. Sullivan immediately investigated the accountant's residence and went to the door, and the killer was watching from the opposite side of the accountant. The accountant was very treacherous, pretending to not find the key to delaying time. Finally, he waited until the killer came from the opposite side to meet Sullivan. Sullivan walked away and fired in the direction of the killer's head. Unexpectedly, it hit the glass vase in front of the killer and changed the direction of the bullet. But the killer was still stabbed by the broken pieces of the vase, and temporarily lost his resistance. Sullivan took advantage of the gap to get into the back room to get the account check and escaped. At this time, the killer struggled to get up and shot along the window, and hit Sullivan in the arm. Mike didn't dare to stop. He stepped on the accelerator and drove the car out of town. Seeing his father was seriously injured and unconscious, he quickly stopped at the side of the road and asked for help from an elderly couple. This enthusiastic couple not only helped Sullivan get ammunition to heal his injuries but also asked the father and son to live with them. In the evening, Sullivan checked the accounts and found that Connor had been using Rooney's power to seek private gains for years. The next day, Sullivan left a sum of money and took his son into the city hastily. Sullivan found Rooney and told him about the things Connor did, but Rooney had long known his son's troubles, so he didn't want to give up his son's life because of this. Besides, no one in the gang had a few lives. Since he had chosen this kind of life, he had to bear the consequences. Rooney told Sullivan that he would protect his son till he was dead. The pain of the bereaved wife and funeral made Sullivan unable to compromise. He decided to fight against the whole gang alone. Sullivan bid farewell to his son and walked to the door of the gang with a gun. When Rooney came out, he killed the bodyguard next to him. It rained heavily in the middle of the night. Rooney fell under Sullivan's gun. This incident soon reached Nitty's ears. Nitty asked Sullivan to guarantee to end the feud. He immediately told the specific location of Connor. Sullivan finally got his revenge. He took his son to the beach, which is the hometown of his wife's sister. He thought it would be over, but when Sullivan looked out the window, the long-hidden killer attacked from behind and knocked Sullivan to the ground. The killer didn't make up the gun immediately but took a photo of his work comfortably. At the same time, Mike heard the gunshots inside the house and rushed to point the killer with the gun. Although Mike was holding a gun, he couldn't get it down. In the end, Sullivan pulled out his pistol and brought down the killer. Mike watched his father take his last breath, sorrowful and unspeakable. He once asked his father why he liked his younger brother more than him. Sullivan replied that he loved both, maybe it was just that his younger brother was cuter. And Mike was more like himself. He didn't want his son to follow in his footsteps, which inadvertently alienated the relationship between father and son. Mike understood his father, so from the moment his father died under the gun, he never touched a gun again. When others asked that Sullivan was a good or a bad man, Mike just responded, "He is my father." Okay, this is the end of this issue. Friends who like it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you next time.